Welcome to Highland League Weekly, the podcast. I'm Ryan Cryle, joined this week by the main team, Callum and Paul Third, as we discuss all of the action in the Breedon Highland League on Saturday. Our main game this week that we'll be discussing first up was Fraserburgh against Clachnacuddin from Bellslea. If you'd like to watch highlights of this game, you can do so by tuning into our main episode of Highland League Weekly over on the Press and Journal website. You need to be a subscriber to watch that, but the good news is you can subscribe via our sport pack and get full access. If you'd just like to chat about the results, as I said, we're going to start with that game. Big clash in terms of the teams up at the top of the table. Finished this one with a 2-0 win for Clachnacuddin away from home at the Brora. Very impressive. Afterwards, though, Callum, their manager, Conor Gethin's perhaps playing down their title chances at this stage in the season?
Aye, well, I think he's, as managers tend to do sometimes.
Not even seeing the table.
There's no one to get cut. No, he didn't try that. But he didn't want to get carried away, which I can understand. But I think really when you start going away to places like Fraserburgh and winning, I mean, I'll speak at the table in a second, but when you win games like that, and you know it's the first time they'd beaten the Brora in any game since April 2017, and the first time they'd won at Bellslea since October 2012. So when you beat another side that's up at the top end and a good team in Fraserburgh, and it end up sort of a long run struggling against them, pardon me, I think it's only sort of natural that people maybe go, well, can Clach be in the mix? And it's a valid question, and Connor's sort of saying no, but I mean, right now you look at where they are, they've played 15 or 16 games, forgive me for not knowing exactly, but there's three, I think it's 16 actually, 3 points off the top, 3 points behind leaders for Formartine, and you know, it's congested in there. Formartine's top, Breacon's there, Clach, Fraserburgh, Brora, it's all pretty close, and they're right in the mix. And I get what he was saying about maybe other teams have the experience of and been over the course before and maybe have that wee bit more depth and things, but sometimes, and it's happened in the past, if you sort of get on a roll and you've got that momentum and confidence and belief, sometimes you don't maybe need that, and if you have a bit of luck with certain things, you can really push. And I think Clach, it's at that point where a lot of people are looking, saying, well, can they have a sustained go at this? And even already you look to Wednesday night and they're up at Dudgeon Park playing Brora, and I mean that's a big game for both clubs, but it kind of feels to me already like if they can get something out of that game, then you would have to say they are very much in the mix and can contend or can go close. And I mean, you look at Saturday's game, they've still got the likes of Andy McRae, Josh Meekins, Greg Morrison, Rory McLeod, Copeland Thane to come back into their squad from injury for Saturday's game, so the signs are looking good for them.
It's one of those where it's because it's Clachnacuddin in a sense. If you looked at that table and the position Clach were in was occupied by, say, somebody we're more used to challenging for titles, Bucky Thistle, for example, would be going title contenders.
But firmly in the hunt for me. I mean, as Callum's touching on, we're away to reach the halfway stage of the season and you're within touching distance of the top of the table. Doesn't matter what your name is, if you're that club in that position, you're a title challenging team as far as I'm concerned.
On the game, I was delighted when I seen James Anderson scoring again, of course. But
you won't get a new year one.
Do you want to, for people, bearing that we're halfway through the season, do you want to tell people why that is?
So I tipped James Anderson to be the top scorer in Highland League football, in North football this season, and I believe he's currently the leader.
19 now.
But Callum, Alan McPhee, who scored Clach's first goal, and we'll need to talk about the goal, of course, but I feel like I've seen his name quite a few times in recent weeks.
Well, he scored a hat-trick against Forest a couple of weeks ago, which is probably part of it, but he scored eight goals this season, Alan, which is from a wide area, and some of the time sort of been playing as a wing-back and that wee bit more defensive is a good return. I mean, I was speaking to him after the game on Saturday, and he said himself that he wasn't even necessarily trying to shoot to that chance on Saturday, and that he usually tries to avoid sort of using his left foot as much as he can, but he just sort of turned and put the ball into an area, and it was one of them where the way he sort of caught it and the trajectory, it was quite hard for like Joe Barber and for Brian Hay in front of him in terms of if there was a touch on it or was there not going to be a touch, and Jack Davison just stepped over it and it's trundled in the bottom corner and giving Clach that vital breakthrough. And it was a good terms of a contest, it was a good contest. It maybe wasn't a classic game in terms of sort of goal-mouth action, but it felt sort of from half-time onwards really like whoever scored first would probably go on to win, I felt. And, you know, the first half, the first 20 minutes especially, I thought they moved the ball well without really overly troubling Fraserburgh in terms of, there was like crosses into the box and things, a couple of set plays, but Joe Barber never had a save to make. And then second half, sort of 55 to 75, I thought Fraserburgh had a very good spell. A few chances. Scott Barber's chance where he gets in behind is sort of the big moment for them, and normally he would score in that position, and if that goes in, it's probably a different game, but it didn't go in, and then Clach had their moment with the first goal, and then the second goal, I mean, as much as Fraserburgh look at it and they could deal with the situation better, I do think you have to give James Anderson credit there, because he turns, it's not a nothing ball, but he turns what's just a sort of ball in behind, almost a clearance, into something by following in and making a nuisance of himself. And if you do that, and I mean, you speaking of Scott Barber, I've seen him do it countless times over the years, and James Anderson's very good at it as well, is getting yourself in there and not, you know, making a nuisance of yourself. And it doesn't always happen, but every once in a while you will get that mistake, or you will get that opportunity, and it's fallen his way on Saturday, and he's taken full advantage.
It's why Clach are challengers. You need a little bit of luck if you're wanting to go and compete for a league title. And Clach had that, to be fair, on Saturday. Both goalkeepers have a moment in the game where they fumble the ball. One gets away with it and the other one doesn't. You then have Scott Barber having a great chance when it's 0-0. One that we would look at, and we have seen time and time again over the years, you'd expect him to put away. That's the little things that you need to go your way if you want to get results in difficult venues. And Clach have managed to do that.
Okay, well, we have a few more games to discuss from the weekend, so we must get on. Brora Rangers 1, Huntly 1. This is where we'll begin. Michael Clark opened the scoring on 26 minutes for Huntly, but that seemed to get Brora going, I'm told. Shane Sutherland's 37th minute penalty was saved, but he scored the rebound. Michael Finnis was then sent off for Brora, but that didn't stop them. It seemed like they had the better chances late on to win this one.
Sounded like it. I think Jordan McRae had a chip that went over when I think Lenny Wilson had sort of come out, and that seemed like the clearest chance to win it for Brora. But I would say a very good point for Huntly, because it's the first time they've taken anything at Dudgeon Park since February 2011. That's 13 straight defeats up there. It's the first time they've scored at Dudgeon Park, never mind got anything, but just scored since March 2016. And as it's been for plenty of teams, because of how Brora have been over the sort of last dozen years or so, Dudgeon Park's been a bit of a graveyard for Huntly. So to get something out of that game on Saturday and was a real boost for them. And, you know, even on top of that, they'd like Andy Hunter, Angus Grant, Lewis Crosby, to name a few, all missing, and they haven't been a great run either. It's only they've only won 2 of their last 14, so to come away for the home of the champions with something was a really positive thing. And I know maybe you say, played sort of 40 minutes against 10 men, could have gone and won it, but Brora sometimes, with the way they can keep the ball and the way they can move the ball, even when they're down to 10, as was the case, they still can cause you a lot of problems. I think if you'd offered Huntly a point before they set off on Saturday morning, they would have been content with that. So a decent result for them. And for Brora, it's hard maybe to put your finger on, but just even going back to the sort of the Formartine game in the league as well a couple of weeks ago, it feels like there's maybe, I'd say they're not far away from their best, but it feels like there's something maybe just not quite clicking overall. And I think they're probably, although I know Stephen Mackay feels they could score more, and they could have scored more in some games this season. I think they probably just feel as well defensively they're losing more goals than they would ideally like, which is maybe feeding into some of the sort of points they've dropped this season. But as I say, I don't think they're far away, and they're still in a good position, 32 points from their 14 games, 5 off the top with the 2 games in hand. But it's interesting as well, because the 2 games in hand are at home to Clach and at home to Brechin, so those are games that Clach game's obviously this week, but the Breedon game will be later in the season. But those are games, that will have a real effect at the top end, whatever the outcome.
Forest Mechanics 1, Formartine United 3. Rory McAllister opened the scoring for Formartine. Jack Grant levelled on 53 minutes. Only for Forest to concede again pretty soon after via Hamish Ritchie. McAllister got a second of the day to seal the points for Formartine. It was that Hamish Ritchie goal sounded like it was a little bit controversial.
That was sort of Steve McDonald, the Forest manager, afterwards. He wasn't sort of saying that was the defining moment or that stopped his team getting something out of the game, but he did feel it was just a couple of minutes after they'd equalised and their sort of tails were up, and he felt in the sort of build up to the goal there was a challenge, Graham Rodger on Mark McLaughlin, and it sort of sent Mark McLaughlin down, and I think Rodger has sort of maybe sort of got the back of his leg and sent Mark McLaughlin tumbling, and Steve McDonald felt his words were 9 times out of 10 you would get a foul for that. But referee Darren Munro didn't give it, and to be fair to Formartine, they kept going and they flooded forward and scored a good counter-attacking goal. But that's one of them where, it is just that it can be a turning point and it is a big moment in the game. But, I mean, what I would say as well is the counter-attacking goals are good goals, but 3 terrific finishes in this game. I mean, Rory McAllister's first one, tremendous for long range. Jack Grant's equalisers are a great finish as well, and then the third for Martin goal, Rory sort of rolling back the years, charging down the left and then coming in and putting it right into the roof of the net. So a high quality finish and a really good win for Martin as well, in terms of with Forest's capability this season. Mossop Park, I think, is a hard place for any team to go. And for Martin as well, without like Scott Ross and Glenn Murison due to suspension, who ordinarily would start. So to sort of overcome that and come away with 3 points to stay at the top of the league is a very good result for them. And I think for Forest, they could play better, but a decent performance, and maybe that wee sense of what might have been just with the sort of nature of the build up to the second for Martin goal.
Yep. Brechin City 3, Turriff United 1. Graham McGrath took until 50 minutes for him to open the scoring for Brechin, but Keenan Sweeney then scored twice. So it's 3-0. Miller Keir with Turriff's consolation. Sounded like Brechin had to be reasonably patient.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Ray McKinnon gave a lot of praise to Turriff for the problems they caused Brechin in the first half, and for Turriff to get to half-time goalless is basically the MO. It's what you're always looking at the away team at Brechin, because we know that they tend to score earlier than go on and dominate on their own patch. So Turriff have done what you're expecting them to do. They've been hard to beat, and they're thinking, right, let's go out in the second half and make a go of this. Unfortunately, Brechin seemed to find another gear, and I think the fact they got their noses in front probably helped there. But games at Brechin will not define Turriff's season. However, for Brechin, up to second now, but as Callum touched on earlier, that game in hand is against Brora. It's shaping up to be a fascinating second half of the season, I think.
Banks of D 2, Nairn County 1. Nairn took an early lead in this one through Callum Mackay, but a Sam Pugh double in the second half moved D to within 3 points of the top 5. 13 games unbeaten though, that's the headline for Banks of D. Josh Winton talking about the fact that he feels it's he feels it's funny that they've still got that big gap to close to the top of the table, but haven't had that run. But I mean, they keep going the way they're going, then they'll be up there.
That's the thing. I mean, as you touched on, 13 games unbeaten. You've got to take some confidence from that. I was one of the ones, I think, who maybe wrote off Banks of D at the start of the season, because I thought they'd had a really sluggish start and other teams were putting points on the board, and you're looking at it thinking this is going to be too big a gap to claw back even over a 34 game season. But credit to them, they're chipping away and they're slowly moving up there. Now, the fact it's such a competitive open title race this season, I mean, we've had that every season, but there seems to be more teams involved at the minute. It's probably helping Banks of D, and they're slowly closing that gap. Yeah, they've still got a lot of work ahead to really get up there before I'm going to go, yeah, they're in the hunt, but they're doing all they can to get back in the mix. Nairn, it's a measure of how well they've been doing. They'd won their last 4 on the road, so they'd gone to Spain Park feeling confident. taking the lead as well. So I mean, they're in a good place. I know they'll be disappointed not to take anything from this game, but Nairn are doing all right as well.
Devon Vale 2, Inverurie Locos 2, Mila Suchmansky, the opener in this one, but his second half slip allowed Jack Mitchell to net for Vale. Mitchell then set up Ryan Park to put Devon Vale ahead, but Bradley Chicomo got Inverurie's late equaliser. Did sound like, though, Cammy Angus could have won it all for Devon Vale late on, but for a save from Zach Ellis.
Yeah, I don't even know how I assess this one. Vale will be really pleased to have come back from a goal down and take a lead, and then I don't know. I mean, I don't think the goal's preventable as such. It's just it's a really smart layoff and a really good finish from Giacomo for the equaliser. But then Vale going again and thinking, oh, we might win this in stoppage time, and Zach Ellis makes that great save. Yeah, 2-2, probably a fair reflection given where both sides are in the table. And I know Dean Donaldson felt that way. Gary Wood, by the same token, he talked to the fact that Locus had given Vale a sore one last season. So to come off a pitch 2-2, feeling you've been hard done by, maybe shows a bit of progress that Devon Vale are making.
Keith 2, Rothes 1, Jordan Lynch and Rory Duncan exchanging goals before Jordan Cooper scored a dramatic late winner. It's going well for Keith at the moment.
Well, it is in the last 6 matches in all competitions, 4 wins, 1 draw, 1 defeat, so you can't really argue with that. And the winning goal, by all accounts, we've yet to receive footage, but hopefully by the time you're watching this, we might have it on screen for you. But by all accounts, the winning goal was a bit of a worldie from sort of wide out on the right. I think Stuart Black had come out and sort of headed the ball away, and Jordan Cooper had sort of gone for glory. And you see at the time when goalie maybe is off his line and folk row or shoot or whatever, and either the player does and it's miles off target or they didn't shoot, but Jordan Cooper went for it and it came off on Saturday, and another valuable 3 points for Keith to sort of keep that good run going. And on the flip side for Rothes, there's obviously some games they've lost this season where they've just been well beaten. It's been a big score, but there's been other games on Saturdays, one where they've been in the game, they've come back to 1-1, chance of getting something, and they've come up short again. And the longer, I've said this before, but the longer it sort of goes on, the more you just feel that it's hard to see how they sort of turn this around and maybe make a fist of getting off the bottom, unfortunately, because they're 9 points adrift just now, and we're just about at the halfway point, and it's going to take a big swing for them to potentially get off the bottom, and unfortunately for the Spaysiders at the moment, it doesn't look very likely.
Yeah, Ronnie Sharp talked about all the other teams picking up points. Rothes don't pick up points. Buckethistle 2, Wick Academy 0, goes from Darryl McCarty and Lyle Keir settled this one. Darryl McCarty continues this fantastic defensive scoring run this season.
The new Jack Murray, that's what he's being called, isn't it? I mean, that's his 400th career appearance, which is some going, 10th goal of the season. Jack Murray's always been big shoes to fill at Bucky. He's still doing terrifically well now at Elgin, but Darryl's really come in and added that goal threat that they need from set pieces or even just a poacher's goal, because he's putting in a rebound if I think Josh Peters' effort comes back off the bar. So he's got that knack about him, and he remains a very good player.
How old is he?
30.
Only 30? Well, plenty of play. 10 years left in him.
Maybe. But yeah,
don't tell him that.
He would say no, given eyes sort of aches and pains to both play and Andy's job as a builder. But
yeah, but I think Bucky needed this one after being knocked out of 2 cup competitions in the last week, so it was important for them to respond. For Wick, disappointing for Gary Manson and how they conceded that first goal. No one really picking up Josh Peters or dealing with the rebound after that, and he feels they had chances but they didn't test Theo Simpson in the Bucky goal, so work for him to do there this week, I would imagine.
The only other thing to say about this is it was a good day for Bucky with their win, but by the sounds of things as well, I think they had a good night on Saturday night, because it was Kevin Fraser's testimonial dinner, and our man who was doing the report on the game was also in attendance in that, and he'd such a good night that he managed to lose his mobile phone. So it's always a surefire sign of a good night. So he'll be watching this, so I'm sure he'll be chuffed with the mention.
Last game from the weekend to talk about: Strathspey, Thistle 3, Lossiemouth 2. Sounded like a great game, this one. Matthew Nicol had Lossie up at the break. James McShane and then Callum Much, though, gave Strathspey the lead before Callum Brown made it 3-1. Owen Loveland completed the scoring with Lossie second. I mean, this is one of these yardstick ones for Strathspey, wasn't it, this game? Because, like, you know, Strathspey and Lossie in recent seasons maybe been sort of teams that have been competing with each other.
Aye, and a good victory for Strathspey in terms of, I think first half they weren't quite at their best, but Ryan Essen got a good response in the second half and they got ahead. I mean, the first goal, actually, Neil has seen them on screen, first goal for Loss is a terrific finish, sort of touch and turn and finish for Matty Nicol. But then Strathspey came back, and I mean, Aaron Anderson, the Coasters goalkeeper, won't want to see the third goal again when he's been charged down by Callum Brown, but these things happen. And another, good 3 points for Strathspey, and that's him played 17 games and they're on 22 points already. And just for a bit of context, since they joined the Highland League in 2009, this is already, and there's still half the season to go, their second best points return that they've had. Only once before they've had more than 22 points, which was season 2018-19 when they finished up with 33. So they're well on, if they can keep this up, they're well on course to have their best season in their history in the Highland League, which would be a tremendous achievement for them.
Would that make Ryan Essen a Manager of the Year candidate? Because we tend to look at whoever wins a league title and going, I think that's the best.
I think if they say they were to double that and they finish on 44 points for argument's sake, and that'll have you somewhere mid-table, he would have to be in that shout, I would say. Whether he wins it, it depends on the votes and that, and it's obviously all the managers that vote for it, but it would hate to be a contender for me if this Strathspey upturn continues. For Lossie, Steve Porter was happier with the performance, and he's been with a couple they've had in recent weeks, but he still sort of felt that they got punished for mistakes that they'd made, and that's ultimately what's cost them. They've scored 2 goals and taken nothing, and I mean, you go through the 3 goals they conceded, like, one's a sort of free header at a corner, second one's a good strike for long range, it takes a wee deflection, and then the third one's, goalkeeping mistake. So I can see where he's coming from in terms of, you sort of look and go, that is preventable, or those goals were preventable and they could have taken something out of the game.
Okay, well, that's all the games from the weekend discussed, and let's have a look. We've discussed enough already, but at the latest Breedon Highland League standings. That's it then for another episode of the Highland League Weekly podcast. Thank you to Callum and Paul for joining me. Just a reminder, if you'd like to watch weekend highlights from Fraserburgh against Clachnacuddin, you can do so over our main Highland League Weekly show on the Press and Journal website. You need to be a subscriber to do that, but you can subscribe via our Sports Park and that will get you full access to everything Highland League and Highland League Weekly. Till we are back and you hear from us next, please keep up to date with everything from us via social media and enjoy the games, whichever ones you're watching in the days ahead.